morning. Hope everybody's well. I am lost this morning, so I've been sitting in front of a computer ever since 15 till, and just now got it up and got it running finally. So it's computers are great when they're working well, and when they're not, they're a pain. And so this one's been a pain this morning. But appreciate everybody being here. Those who are visiting with us, we want you to know how much we appreciate you being here. If you would open your Bibles to 1 Timothy 5, we're ready for verse 7. 1 Timothy 5 and verse 7. Before we begin, let's go to God in prayer. Let's remember those of our number who are sick. As far as I know, the sick are about the same. Ann's down with Adrian. I think Adrian got to go home yesterday, and she is doing some better. And so all the ones that are sick, I think, are better. They gave Adrian, of course, I don't think they were real sure what she had. She had maybe some kind of virus or something, but they actually gave her too much insulin, and really was a kind of a mess for a while. But they got her sugar back up and stuff, and I think she did get to go home, and for that we're grateful and thankful. Zach McCord's granddad did pass away, and his funeral's Monday. So for those that want to know that, the burial is Monday. The funeral's at 12. I think the visitation is from 10 to 12, and it's in Hazel Green, Alabama. I think it's the Hazel Green Funeral Home. But keep that family in our thoughts and prayers as we certainly as we pray. But we would ask you to bow. Mike, how about leading us in a word of prayer? Amen. All right, we're ready for verse 7. What is Paul talking about here in 1 Timothy 5? You know, you go back to 1 Timothy 3 and verses 15. He talks about the behavior in the house of God. And we've talked about this quite a bit since we've been studying this. But it's important for us to understand that there's a certain behavior that the Lord expects of his people. And it didn't matter whether you were young or old, you're middle-aged, or whoever it might be. He expects certain things of us as his people. And, of course, he talked about the behavior in the house of God. He writes that to Timothy. Timothy's an evangelist. There are certain things that are required of those who preach and teach the gospel, but then there are certain requirements of those who make up the body of Christ as well. Those who would be elders, those who would be deacons, those who would be their wives, whether they were old men, old women, and young women. And then he takes up this discussion of who in these verses? Talking about widows. And he's talking about certain kinds of widows. He talks about widows that are truly widows, that are destitute and have no one to provide for them. Other widows that obviously have children or grandchildren to provide and take care of them. And then you have younger widows that he talks about in this particular text as well. And so there are different types of widows that he talks about. Now, there were certain widows that that the church had a greater responsibility toward than did others. Now, who was it that the church had the greater responsibility toward? Which widow? It would be those that were destitute, those that didn't have children or grandchildren, and those who were older. How old did they have to be? Had to be 60. He specifies that. It's kind of amazing as he looks at that. Younger widows were commanded to do what? Marry. Okay. They were commanded to marry. And of course, and he talks about all this in this particular text. Now, there's some of this that's a little challenging. I'll grant you that. To me, at least, it is, as you look at this. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through this. But still, though, there are certain things that are required of those who would be widows as well. There are certain things that those widows that would be taken into the number, provided for on a continual basis support for the church, there are certain things that they have had to have done throughout their lifetime to be a part of that would be provided for by the church on a continual basis. There are certain qualifications that they had to meet, just like we looked at. 60 would be one of those things, but that's not the only thing that would be involved in that. And obviously, I think as you look at these things that he says concerning them, that they have to be very righteous and very holy, very upright women who have loved and served the Lord, have been faithful to the Lord over their lifetime. And as a result of that, then the church had a responsibility to provide for them. You know, we talked about this on Wednesday night. One of the great things that we have in this country, and that is that we have things that are there and available to those that have need. We talked a little bit about Social Security. They have that, don't they? And there are lots of programs that are available to them that wherein that those that are destitute, that they can be provided for. But still, though, Don brought this up Wednesday night. Social Security sometimes for a widow is not enough, hard to provide for her needs. And this day and time, that's really true, isn't it? You know, when you look at the price of gas and you look at the price of groceries and all of those kind of things, and it could be that you might have some that they might need some additional help and provide it, particularly those that don't have children or grandchildren. If you're a child and grandchild, you have a grandmother, mother, make sure that they're provided for. You take care of them. That's what the Lord expects of us as His people. And these are some things that He's talking about in this particular text. Anything anybody has before we get into verse 7? Anybody want to share anything? Okay, let's look at verse 7 then. He said, "And these things command that they may be blameless." Now, these things command. Now, what are these things that He's commanding? All right, certainly the young evangelist, he's to command these things, and these are things that are required of them. But who's the they here, that they may be blameless? Well, certainly that could involve that and would involve that. What about the church? You know, those that he would teach. This is the responsibilities that he's talking about in the church. This is behavior in the house of God. This would be all. And now, what are these things? These things command. What things? You know, sometimes these are simple words that we look at, but then if you trying to decide exactly what he meant by that, if you keep it in its context, what is he talking about? Yeah, it's talking about the widows. You go back as far as, look at verse 3. He said, honor widows who are really widows. And then he goes on, he says, but if any widow has children or grandchildren, let them provide for them. Now, she who is really a widow, in other words, and left alone, trust in God, and continues in supplication and prayers night and day. But then he talks about those that might live in pleasures, is dead while she lives. And then he says, and these things, all these things that he had just mentioned, he said, these things command that they may be blameless, that the church may be blameless. are those that would be involved in this. It could be grandchildren, who obviously would cover those, children, grandchildren, and widows and stuff. These are things that they had to teach. But this is how the church can be blameless if these things are taught and they listen and they are obedient to these things. Miss Fern? Sure. Okay. Yeah. Well, and that's right. Now, who is it in a congregation that has the responsibility of the care of the witness? Make sure that they're provided for. Deacons, they would have that responsibility, wouldn't they? And it's not that the elders don't have any responsibility, but elders have to make sure that the deacons do indeed take care of those situations. But they're the ones, you remember back in Acts 6, most people believe that he's talking about deacons in Acts 6. Now, who was it that was being neglected in Acts 6? First few verses. It was widows. It was the Grecian widows. They were being neglected. And so they were told to look out among them that they may appoint men over that work to oversee and take care of those widows. And so here you had a responsibility. Here you had men that was selected to oversee that and to make sure that they're provided for. And most people, as I said, the word that's used there, one of the words that's used, it's not the word deacon, but it's where we get the word deacon from. They had the responsibility of making sure that those Grecian widows were provided for. They were being neglected in the daily ministration. And so there were some things that should have been provided for them, was not being provided. They were being neglected. And those men were selected so that they could see that those needs were provided for. And so it seems to be the deacon's responsibility to make sure that that happens and that occurs. First of all, you have to know the congregation. You have to be aware of those who may be with us. You have to be aware of those who may have some needs, and those needs may have to be provided for. Now, they have responsibilities, obviously, to all the widows, but the church, as far as placing one on the permanent role of the church and permanent providing for, would have to be one who would be truly a widow. And, we talked about this. Sometimes you have children and grandchildren. Are children and grandchildren always willing to take care of their mothers and grandmothers? The sad thing about that is that's the case, isn't it? They don't always provide for them. Have you ever seen people that, and know of children and grandchildren that didn't take care of their mothers or their grandmothers or grandfathers or whatever the case might be? I dare say that most of us know someone like that. And we have to make sure that doesn't describe us. It's quite an honor for us to be able to take care of our mother, our grandmother, our grandfather, or father, or whoever it might be. It's an honor for us to be able to do that. When he tells us to honor mother and father, honor, to truly honor them involves more than just showing respect. That's involved. But if you don't provide for them financially, if they have financial needs, are you really showing the proper respect for your mother or for your father that you should be if they have needs and you're not providing for them? Well, no. That's one of the things that the Jews were doing, and we noticed that in our studies, like in Mark 7, verses 9 through 13. Parallel passage would be Matthew 15, verses 4 through 9. They tried to escape their responsibility by saying, well, we've devoted this to God, and this is God's, and we can't use these financial means to provide for our mother and father. And I'm going to tell you, that wasn't very pleasing to the Lord. But these are the things that they were to command, that they may be blameless. Do these things. Follow this instruction. I think this is what he's telling us. And, of course, these things command. Paul's telling Timothy, you command those that make up the body of Christ. You command them to do this. This is what's required of them by God. Paul's speaking by inspiration, he being an apostle, and he certainly wanted them to teach these things and to command these things that they might do them. What does it mean to be blameless? Okay. Not being able to be charged with something that they have not done, something that they have failed to do. And so they would be blameless in that. Here's a comment by David Lipscomb. David Lipscomb made this years ago. He said, give these teachings in charge of the whole church that they may be without blame in providing for widows indeed, and not pampering idleness in those to take care of themselves. And of course, he commands, require that they not be idle, some, and that they be workers and be dedicated and be diligent in doing these things. And so he talks about several things that are required of them. All right, any thoughts about verse 7? Anybody? Okay, look at verse 8. He said, "But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." Now, in the context, what's he talking about? If he doesn't provide for his own. All right, mother, father, or widow. If you're a son or a daughter, or even a grandchild, and you don't do that, then what are you? You're worse than an unbeliever. How could it be worse than an unbeliever, you think? Okay. That's right. And I really think it's kind of an emphasis thing. He says, you think that you're righteous and holy when you don't do this? No, he said, you're as bad or worse than an unbeliever. Yet, and worse than an unbeliever, what do most unbelievers do? Take care of their parents. There you go. Take care of their grandparents. Most unbelievers do that, don't they? But now here's a believer. It claims to be a believer and a follower of Christ, and he's not doing that. He's worse than they are. At least they're doing that. They're not following me, but at least they're taking care of their mom and dad or their granddad and grandmother. At least they're doing that. That's kind of what he's saying here. And that's how they're worse than that. They claim to be something that they are not. Does the unbeliever claim to be a Christian, be a follower of Christ? No, he doesn't claim that, does he? But yet he's still providing for his own. That's how they're worse than, it seems like to me. And that's what he's talking about. But now let's take that a step further. He is the only one that I'm to take care of is mother and dad, or granddad and grandmother. The only one I'm to take care of. Take care of your family. It says household. What about children? In the society which we live in today, do many fathers take care of their children? Or do we have a lot of fathers that are negligent in taking care and providing for their own children? Well, you have a lot that they don't provide for. And they really don't care whether they provide for them or not. And how isn't that a sad commentary on a person's life when they don't even take care of their own children? They don't mind having children, it seems like, because they enjoy what happens prior to having children. It's the sexual desires and the fulfillment of their sexual desire. That's all they care anything about, it seems like, on some occasions. But yet once the child gets here, they don't want to have anything to do with the child. They don't want any responsibilities at all. And, of course, how sad that is. But he says, here if he does not provide for his own. Then he says, especially those of his household. Now, can we have people that we're related to that are not part of our household? Well, it's not likely that our grandparents live with us, is it? A lot of times our mothers and fathers, they don't live with us. They could. But a lot of times they don't live with us. And so, there's the responsibilities that we have toward them as well. So he tells us to provide for our own. And if we don't, then we're worse than an unbeliever. So we have a responsibility toward them to work and make sure that they are provided for. All right, anybody have any thoughts or ideas about this? Vicki?
What's even more sad is the women in children's life nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
They actually carry that child for 9 months. It's still no worse than a man. They don't have any desire to have that baby.
Well, it is. And the sad thing, I hope you read the article last week in the Bulletin talking about abortion. That's one of the things that happens in our society today. They get pregnant, a woman gets pregnant, she didn't want to have any duty of responsibility, she goes and kills the baby. Yeah, how sad is that? That's pretty bad, isn't You know, if you don't want the baby, have the baby and give the baby to somebody. Somebody else would want the baby. You know, Sylvia never could carry a child, had several miscarriages, and we eventually adopted. We would have been glad to have more than one child, I'm going to tell you. We would have been happy to raise several. But you know, that's sad state of affairs, not only in this country, but in other countries as well. When we were in Russia, my first trip over there was in 1994. We went to Tula, south of Moscow, and we noticed that not a lot of kids, and the thing that we noticed most, and I was made aware of this, that in a city of about 1 million people or so, that there were no women hardly at all that we saw that were pregnant when carrying a child. And we asked them about that, said they all have abortions. And I said, man, what a terrible commentary on a country and on a people that they would do that. And it's just beyond me. And if you don't think that's troubling after a woman has that, let me tell you a story about a lady that I met when I was in Nashville. She had an abortion when she was a younger girl, and she had an abortion. And I'm going to tell you, to the day she died, it was extremely troubling to her, and she regretted that her entire life, and it just ate at her. And so, but that's the sad state of affairs that we're in. Don, you had something. Yeah. Yeah. 2 Thessalonians 3:10, isn't it? Isn't that the verse? Yeah. Yeah, he said if a man won't work, neither should he eat. And so there are plenty of people that won't work. And, you know, I see people this day and time out begging on the streets, and they could be unfortunate. I understand that. There are some that, you know, truly are unfortunate. But you know, when you see them out begging on the street and you watch them walk up there and you don't see anything physically wrong with them, and, you know, and begging, and there's every place around needs workers, and they just will not work. And I've told you this many times. My dad was, he had all these old sayings and stuff. He says, you know, some people wouldn't work in a pie factory tasting pies, and that used to be one of his favorite sayings. And so, and I'm going to tell you, there are some people that are just like that, and they won't. Do we have a responsibility toward those that won't work? No, we don't have any responsibility toward them. Won't work, neither should they eat. And that's part of what we need to observe as well. Of course, I know sometimes there can be some extenuating circumstances, but here's a person that just will not work, and neither should they eat, as you said. So, yeah, that's the case. Yeah, it's they won't provide for themselves, much less their own household, right? So, yeah, that's a sad state, but you know, that's the kind of country that we live in this day. And obviously, it was a problem then too, wasn't it? It's not just a problem now; it's been a problem all throughout history, as we can look and see. Anybody else have anything about verse 8? All right, but there he tells us that we have a duty and responsibility toward those. Particularly, he's talking about the widows, I think, the widows indeed, but also our own household as well. And could it be an aunt and uncle that we have to help at some time and at some point? Do we have a responsibility toward them? Well, yeah, we have responsibility. You know, they're part of our family, aren't they? You know, most of us never encounter that in our lives. You know, I've never had to help my aunt or uncle or anybody like that. I've never had to help my grandparents. My grandparents, 2 sets of grandparents were dead before I was ever born, so I never did even get to see them. But my grandmother on my dad's side, Dad's half brother took care of her till she died, and she actually lived with him, and so and all the kids provided for her and took care of her. She didn't have a lot of income, but they took care of her. And my granddad, he was a retired coal miner, and he had a good retirement, and he lived to be almost 94, and he was able to take care of himself. He had plenty. He had more than any of us did. So at that time, so from financial or physical standpoint, so he didn't have any needs. And so, but you know, most of the time you don't run across that. But if you do, then you do have a responsibility. As my mother grew older and her mind got bad, I didn't need to take care of her financially. She had enough finances to take care of herself. But now there were other things that she needed, and you know, and I'm thankful that we're able to provide those things for her till she died. And so, you know, I don't regret that at all. Just glad to be able to do a little bit, because I remember the sacrifices that she made for me growing up. And so, you know, your love for them should cause us to honor them. That's for sure. All right, any thoughts? All right, look at verse 9. He said, do not let a widow under 60 years old be taken into the number, and not unless she has been the wife of one man. So he continues this ideal of women who are truly widows. So could she be taken into the number, be put on the, as he says here, taken into the number, placed among those that was permanently supported by the church if she was under 60? No. What if she had needs? Could the church provide some needs for her, though, if she had some needs, without placing her on the permanent roll of the church? Yeah, they could do that. Could it be that she might have some needs at some time, at some point? Yeah, she could have. Now, what about this? This is to me, says, and not unless she has been the wife of one man. Now, before you answer that, let me ask you this question. You think about this for just a minute. Here's a woman that her first husband died. She remarries. She had a right to the second husband that she married. He dies. Here she meets every one of those qualifications that you're talking about being a widow indeed. Could she, if she's above 60, she's met all those other qualifications, could she be placed on the permanent roll of the church if she meets all those other qualifications? Ms. Fern. There you go. Husband of one wife. Yeah. She remarries. Okay, yeah. Okay. Interesting thought. Anybody? Okay. Okay. Then of a divorce or something like that? Yeah. Right? Yeah. 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 Okay. Do it. Right. Yeah. And that's really the discussion that you're looking at here. You know, it's one of those situations that you hope that you never have to deal with. But, I mean, it might be that you have to deal with it at some time and at some point. And, of course, it's most all the commentaries that I read, and believe me, I understand this. This is what men say, and this is not what the Lord said. Most commentaries take the position, though, and as long as she had a right to even the second, she would only been the wife of one man. That's what she had been. When that man died, she had been the wife of one man. And like I said, now then, there's another little aspect to this that I want you to see as well. A little later, he tells the younger widows to do what? Marry. All right. So now, obviously, she's a widow. Something had happened to the first husband, obviously. Now she's to take a second husband. Isn't that what he says for her to do? All right, and when she does that, and when she does what Paul tells her to do, as he commands Timothy, and she's met all those other qualifications, now all of a sudden, is she not a widow indeed then? Because she's married, done what was required of her. She married. She was a younger widow at that time. She married. That husband died. And now she's not a widow indeed because she did what she was told to do. That's pretty tough, isn't it? That's the problem I have with this. And as I told you in the very beginning, I said, This is a little hard for me, and I understand that. I understand that, just like what Jerry says. I mean, you're looking at it. If you just look at it, what it said, it's, just a husband of. She had to be the wife of one husband. Well, even if it was, she would have been that. I mean, even if she had been married a couple of times. I mean, and the first one died, and the second one died, and so on. But that's a kind of a tough situation, Miss Fern. Hmm? Yeah. 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 Well, and that's what he's telling her to do. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is, and that's one of the things. That's one of the reasons he tells the younger widows to marry is because of, I mean, she's still young, and she's young enough to have a husband and satisfy any sexual desires that she has. And that's the way you satisfy those sexual desires is through marriage. And he even talks about, the things that he goes on and tells her to do. Manage the house. He says, therefore, I desire that younger widows bear children. So now, how old is she? she's under 60, we know. Okay. But what's she able to do? She's able to have children. So she's still at the age that she can have children. She's still at the age that she can marry. And she's still at the age that she can have children, and of course, so it's important for us to see these things. What is it that we really need to get out of all this? If we don't fully grasp and fully understand the scenario and situation, every situation about this, and like I said, there's some different scenarios that we can look at and paint, and the answers are not that easy sometimes. But what do we need to get out of all this? All right, our obligations. The obligations that we would have toward a mother or grandmother. What else? She's willing indeed. If she is that, then we know what she's to do. She's to receive, be permanent support from the church if she's that. Doesn't have anybody to provide for her. Now, how many cases do you know of, and maybe since I've been a Christian, Sylvia and I obeyed the gospel in 1974, since I've been a Christian, you know how many widows and deeds that I can think of? Not a single one can I think of, not a single one. Because most widows that I knew had children or grandchildren, or they were provided for. And I've never known of a widow to be on a permanent roll of the church. Does anybody know of one like that? A situation like that? It doesn't mean that it's not. In this country, it would be hard for that to, I think, kind of a little hard for that to happen. But I dare say in some other countries, like in Africa and places like that, and in some of those churches, like we support men in Zimbabwe, and would be a little more prevalent, I suppose, there, and be a little more of an issue with them because of the lack of things to provide for them. We just sent money to Zimbabwe, members of the church here, to help feed Christians there that they don't even have, they can't provide for them. They don't have the, if they had a little money, they don't have crops to buy. I mean, the crops have failed and because of the drought and stuff. And so, in some countries like that, they would be a little more prominent, obviously. Saw that in Russia, a little more in Russia. A lot of older women struggle. They get a little pension from the government, though. That's one reason that they want communism. Because they get supported a little bit from the government. Very little, but they have enough to buy a little food and put on the table. You know what a lot of the older people over there do? They sell their medication that they get from the government, and they sell it and do without the medicine to have money to buy food with. That's pretty sad, isn't it? But that's just the kind of country. Now, to me at least, you see what communism does and atheism. That's the result of it. So we can see that, but. We're certainly very, very blessed. All right. Any other thoughts about any of this? Don? Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
All right, if she's enrolled, the qualifications to be met. There's some people that contend that since there's qualifications to be met, if she's enrolled,
Yeah.
there's some type of work that this witness will
Yeah.
do on behalf of the
Yeah.
church. Is that indicated in this text, or is that just speculation?
I think it's just speculation. I don't think it's, obviously it says it within the text itself. It's just talking about her support here. But it is talking about what she's done. The body of work that she's done basically as a Christian. And I say body of work. It's not something that the church, a role or a work that was given to her in the church, but it's simply something that as a Christian that she's done. For instance, washing the saints' feet, and helping and aiding. And of course, it talks about all those things that she was to do. Now, verse 10 says, well reported for good works. She has brought up children. She has lodged strangers. And if she has washed the saints' feet, if she has relieved the afflicted, and if she has diligently followed every good work. And so really, I think the only thing it's talking about here is the good work that she's done. And that had to be before she was placed on the roll, because she had to do these things before being placed on the roll. She had to have been that kind of person for her to be permanently supported by the church. And so it's not talking about her work after she's placed on the roll, but it's talking about what she did before she could be placed on that roll. So to me, that would be my thoughts on that, at least. But you are right. I mean, I've read enough commentaries to know what people say, and actually even word studies. Vincent in his word studies, and maybe even A.T. Robertson in his word pictures as well, would kind of indicate that in their definition of the term. But others, Thayer's and complete word studies, didn't define it that way at all. It's simply, what she had done prior to that. Okay, that's a good question, though, Don. So yeah. Any other thoughts about that? Somebody else may have some thoughts on that.
Back to the husband of one
Uh-huh.
wife, one husband. I guess that come down to it, the safe way would be, instead of using the church treasury money to
Mm-hmm.
support this woman, you do it individually.
You could.
That way it would eliminate the
Well, if there would be some controversy, if there'd be somebody that would object to it, rather than causing division, if there'd be people that would be willing to do that, then certainly that's one of the things that you obviously could do. So yeah. There's a lot of things that we individually can do, even that the church can't do. I mean, we can see that, and he talks about that. There's a difference between the individual and the church itself. There's a lot of things I can do. Can I support the Red Cross? Can the church? No, it's not the work of the church, is it? Can I support the Republican Party? Can I send donations to them? Can the church? Well, no, that's not the work of the church, is it? And so we can see a number of things like that. So yeah, it is, and will be, and I can understand why. I mean, like I said, the only problem I have with that, and just strictly saying that she couldn't have had been married twice, even if she had a right to the husband, is the fact that she's commanded as a younger widow to marry. And then if she got to that state that she's done all those things and met all those qualifications, and she doesn't have anybody to take care of, she couldn't be placed on the permanent roll of the church simply because she had been married twice and she had a right to be married both times, and now doesn't have anybody to take care of her. So, that's the, and she was told to marry, and she was told to marry, and then she did what she was told to do, and then she couldn't receive the support. But now we could do this. What about this? She needed some support. Could the church provide some support to her and just not place her on a permanent roll? If she had needs, that would be part of the answer, maybe some of the answer to that at least. Linda?
I was going to say, since we've been attending here, we had a lady out here that, I don't know how much help she needed,
Yeah.
not Butchie, but the members, it was amazing how everybody took care of her.
Took care of her?
When she passed away, her house was sold and
How about that? Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, and I dare say, if we had somebody here like that, you know, I just really believe that all of us as members, that we would make sure that that person was taken care of. Most of us have above and beyond the things that we need, and we can help other people. Don't you think that's the case? You know, if you look at it from the standpoint of here you have 12 months in a year, and 1 month out of a year, maybe I could provide for her, buy her food, and take care of anything she had need of. And here's another family over here, and they could do that 1 month. Would that be a big sacrifice for any of us? That wouldn't be a big sacrifice for any of us. And so, you know, that's a great thing we can see about this too, is that we would be willing to do that. And if we had opportunity, I think all of us would do that. And even in situations like this. But, you know, when the New Testament was written, it was a little different for them than it would be for us. I think, you know, because there was a lot, you know, husbands died and you know, kids died. So you know, and that's some of the issues that you can see. Let me get Michael. Michael. Well, that's true, and we have responsibilities toward them, yeah, in that. And so, regardless of that, that's for sure. One of the things too. Now notice this. Look at verse 10. So, verse 9 says, "Do not let a widow under 60 years old be taken into the number, and not unless she has been the wife of one man, comma." This next verse is a continuation of that. "Well reported for good works, if she brought up children." Now then, let me stop right there. If she brought up children. Now then, where's her children? Okay. Right, yeah. But I'm talking about this scenario here. She's brought up children. Well, but that's right. But what were her children supposed to do for her? Take care of her. And so we're talking about a widow indeed here. She can't be taken into that number unless she's brought up children. So now what's happened to the children? Maybe not. But to me, that's part of this little scenario as well. I'm thinking, well, if she's brought up children, then her children have a responsibility, right? And they're the ones that should be taking care of her. But now all of a sudden, it seems like that the children are not there, obviously. Because if the children are there, then they have the responsibility. But for her to be placed on the permanent role of the church, she had to bring up children. Could children have died? Yeah, I mean, that's very possible, isn't it? And so there are all kinds of situations, and there's some questions that we can raise about this. But the important thing is that we see that if here's a person that she has needs, and we can provide those needs for her, then certainly that needs to be taken care of. But if she's a widow indeed, then the church has some responsibilities toward her. But I think all of us would be willing to take care of any widow that we can see. And there's some here, and I could give you some instances, but I'm not going to do that because it would be embarrassing to some, and I know that. It'd be embarrassing to more than one party. But there's been several occasions since I've been here that we have seen some widows that did have need, and those needs were met and taken care of. And they're continually taken care of as well. And so, you know, that's how I know. I know that they'd be taken care of here by members of the body of Christ. And these individuals, may be widows, one widow indeed as well. But they are taken care of, and her needs are provided for. All right, any other thoughts? Vicki? Well, if she's met all those qualifications and they won't, yeah, I would say so. Yeah, that would be my guess. But it would be a sad state of affairs and a sad commentary on them if they wouldn't take care. But you do have some that wouldn't. So yeah, that doesn't disqualify her because they don't meet their qualifications. I don't think so. Anybody else? How do you feel about that? What's your thoughts? Anybody? You probably like me. You probably think the same way. So yeah, but she's done that. She's done what she should do, and of course, they've not taken into the number here. We didn't define that here to be enrolled in the body of widows who are to receive church support. To receive that's Vincent's definition of it. The Concise Greek English Dictionary says enrolled or to place on a list for financial aid by the church, and so that's the number taken into the number that he's talking about. Provided for by the church. Let's look at verse 10, and we have just a minute or two. He said, well reported for good works, if she's brought up children, if she's lodged strangers, if she's washed the saints' feet, if she has relieved the afflicted, and if she has diligently followed every good work. So now what kind of woman must this woman be? Righteous. Holy woman. You know, she's been that kind of person. She's dedicated her life serving the Lord. Now, it's not talking about a sinless person. If it was a sinless, then none of us could be qualified to do anything in the kingdom. But here's a person that's given her life to do what's right in service as the Lord. Well reported for good works. What are good works? How do we determine good works? Yeah, the Bible. Well, it's whatever the Bible tells us to do. You know, there's a number of good works, and I think all of us can understand that. And there's some things that we need to obviously need to do and be the kind of people that we need to be. If she's brought up children, she's been a good mother. You know, and some people talk about bringing up children and not necessarily her own children. You know, there are people who didn't have their own children, but they've helped bring up other children. You know, what if you know, my grandmother raised my dad, and so she brought up children, and Daddy wasn't her child. But and not only did she bring up, Daddy had a sister, an older sister. She took care of Dad and Dad's older sister, and then she had some other children that she raised as well. And I remember visiting the old house that she raised those kids in. It's 3 rooms. There's a kitchen, big old huge living room, and had a bed in it, and a bed back there. It was just bed after bed after bed back. And I still remember that so well. And but she raised a lot of kids, and a lot of kids that she raised were not her own. But she did that. She was busy doing those things. And so here it says, if indeed she's lodged strangers. How would you describe that in this particular woman? Lodging a stranger. Showing hospitality. She was a hospitable woman. Washed the saints' feet. A lot of times people connected lodging strangers with washing saints' feet. And certainly that would be the case. You know, what would be one of the things that would be provided for those that were traveling from place to place? During New Testament times at least. Water to wash their feet. And so that their feet could be washed and clean. They had sandals. A lot of times their feet would be dirty, and of course it did. What one thing did Jesus show us, and what great act of humility did he do? Washed his disciples' feet. What did he tell us to do? Do likewise? You know, that's the thing he wants us to do. If you think that you're too good to wash somebody's feet, then you need to reassess yourself and reassess your life. None of us are too good to do that, and we ought to be willing to do that, provide things for them. And so this is the kind of person, relieve the afflicted. Who are the afflicted? You know, sometimes we think afflicted are mentally afflicted. Well, that could be the case. But sick, okay, could be sick. Could be anybody that needs. Figuratively, oppressed of evil, afflicted, or distressed. Could be people in distress. She's willing to do that and willing to help. If she has diligently followed every good work. And so that's the kind of person that she was. Any thoughts? We'll stop there. We'll continue that Wednesday, Lord willing. Okay, thank you.